And we're live. Episode 54. Geoff and Kira live. How are you?
I'm well. That was such a deep sigh, Jeff. Are you tired?
I mean, it was a deep sigh because I am enjoying the fun times of uh, learning how to successfully run a podcast, which is good times, and run from a technical standpoint is not easy to learn how to do from a technical standpoint. Fortunately, we've had Akira who's helped us a lot, but I just am not the best at that type of these types of things with like the tech stuff. So
I don't
have
know why you say that. You always do a really great job.
I try. I try. It's it's not always easy. Like right now I'm trying to, so when you have a podcast, you can share it on different pages, and it's not easy because you have a system called OBS, and having to broadcast that to different channels is a complicated process. But I'm going through it now. Like we are now live on the Geoff and Kira Facebook Live page, which is exciting because that was
Is
not
it?
easy to get hooked up. But I think we can share it to our own channels. Like, have you done that? Have
I
you?
did. I just shared it on my Facebook.
Okay, I need to figure out how to. So if I share it to, maybe that will go to my page now. See what that does. Um, is it even on my? See, I don't even think it went to my. See if it even worked. Sorry for the. See, I slowly learn these technical glitches. Yeah, like I don't even know how to get it on my individual Facebook.
I could show you because I just added it on
How,
mine.
how did you do it? Did you just? There we go.
I just share. You just hit the three dots and then it'll like give you the options. Like go to your Facebook or go to the Jeff and Kira live Facebook, and
Yeah.
then you'll see like the three buttons below it.
Uh
Or
huh.
the share button, and then click on that, and then you should be able to share it from there.
Share to uh, more options. Share to group. Share via. I don't know. If you know how to do it, feel free to share it to my page because I can't figure out how to
I
do
will.
it.
I'll share.
Um, I am entirely bad at that. Anyway, so we're live on most channels. We're going through this. It's really interesting just seeing how I watch and I see how other people try to fight through tech glitches of stuff, and it's really interesting how hard it can be because from an outsider's perspective, when people do a podcast, and that's why I get mad because I see half the internet, especially I see a lot of media and mainstream media and stuff making fun of podcasts, and I think it is the most insulting thing to make fun of podcasts because it's people who don't necessarily have a voice trying to have a voice, and I think it just shows like fear in people. If you're a big journalist at a big network or something, and you're making fun of someone doing a podcast, like I just think that's so making fun of the little person. Like I hate that. It's just a big pet peeve because people put a lot of work into what they're doing, and if your voice is heard, like who are you to make fun of people trying to get their voice heard? Do you agree with like?
Yeah, I agree. I think they come from a like an elitist standpoint, to be
Really?
honest. Sure. I think it's probably the same way that psychologists view life coaches and mental wellness advocates.
Yeah.
Like scoffing, like, oh, how dare you, try and, you know, be part of this industry when you're not, this elite group of reporters. So,
I just feel
I think
like, yeah.
I think personally, you have to just kind of brush that shoulder off and just be like, I could care less what, anyone thinks, and stay true to yourself, and not really care.
Yeah, yeah. I think that yeah, I think that's really interesting. Um, and I think it's really going to be interesting to see what happens in the future, just as far as that
Yeah.
goes, because you do have a lot of people doing podcasts now, and a lot of people who, and from their perspective, and I do agree with them on this. You have a lot of people who are trying to have a voice. However, it also spreads a lot of misinformation and disinformation from people who might not necessarily know what they're talking about with things. And I think that's the concern from a lot of people, with bigger networks, is just, false information spreading. So, as I often try to do, I'm trying to help people see that there's a point of view from each side that I think is legit, and I think it's a tough thing. And I know that kind of leads us into some of what we're going to discuss today, which is the idea of information and how it's relayed to people and how people interpret it. And I wanted to start before we get into healthcare, which I know you have a lot of thoughts on. I want to hear what you have to say about it. I wanted to start with like information, just how information is relayed, because I'm watching this AOC video, from the Capitol riot, and she was talking about, tragically, just how, the rioters, and how she went through a story of tragically just assault and how it connected to her, and it was really painful and hard to watch. And then some people came out the next day, which I guess was yesterday, and we're saying, well, AOC wasn't even in the Capitol building; she was in a neighboring building, and I didn't really understand, what they were saying, because from what I said when I watched it, she said she was in a neighboring building. She wasn't in she was in a neighboring building, and she said that, and she heard the rioters outside. Like, it's basically her describing how traumatic it was for her,
Right.
where the rioters were. And so it's really like that simple. And she was in a neighboring building, but then she was in a hallway, like they were probably being moved around, and she was trying to figure it out. And I think she went in the restroom at one point or something. She said, but the bottom line is this was really traumatic for her, and to assume that she's lying in some way, or that it's just not, it's not appropriate. It's just spreading of you know misinformation and bad rumors. Like, she, from everything I saw and from what I read, she definitely was not lying. And but the way, because she's AOC, who I just adore. But a lot of people get very angry with me about that, but I've always liked AOC, and I've always defended AOC. But uh, it's very easy in her story, because she says there's a lot of stuff she talks about from the day of. It's very, very easy to take things out of context and to misinterpret things she's saying. And I was just debating Jess Turner about this on Twitter. It's very easy to do that, and I think the problem is with social media now is it gives so many people. This is perfect for our discussion. It gives so many people that opportunity to have a voice, and people can relay their thoughts and what they have to say so quickly to one another, that it allows a massive amount of misinformation. And what we're missing in society, in the world and everything, is our interpreters, or our groups of people who help people try to figure out what the right and what the wrong is. And maybe on a lot of topics there's not a right and wrong, but on a lot there actually is. And it would be helpful if things were more transparent, with information, not just from one person, but if we had like a group of people that were like publicly helping people figure out what's real and what's not. Do you know what I'm saying? I think it could help.
Yeah, the problem is everyone has their own truth, and people will believe wholeheartedly in things that other people think are completely insane.
Yeah.
So how do you find a human being that's objective? Who determines what is the accurate information and the false information? And it comes down to like, and we'll use AOC, for example. To her, that was her truth, and she spoke her truth. To other people, she was lying. So who's right and who's wrong? Is there a right or is there a wrong there? So, who's the ultimate judge to decide facts? And, the problem is that's her perception. So you can't argue with someone's perception because that is where they are coming from. And I think what social media is doing is it's creating this environment where people are saying, well, your perception of the world's wrong. But you can't do that. You're not in that person's body to be able to say that what she was experiencing was not a traumatic experience.
Of course.
It's like,
of course.
well, of course you can't say that. You know what I mean? No, but that's what people are saying.
Why do people say that?
Because they're placing their own thoughts on someone else, and it's honestly my biggest pet peeve with like human beings. I can't stand when people put their own beliefs and their opinions on others and believe like that's the word of God or something. It's the most like nails on a chalkboard thing for me to listen to someone tell another person what they should or should not think or do in their life. That is like, to me, is so egregious. I can't handle people like that. I can't be around them. I just can't. And unfortunately, that's all social media is. It's all, this pointing fingers of like, well, this is what what they should do, and this is what he or she should see. And it's like, what dream world do you live in that, you can just say things like that and tell people what they should and should not be doing? My God. I mean, the balls people have these days are shocking. I think what's missing is grace and humility, knowing your place in the world, which is not to just spew out your opinions for, everyone to hear just because you think you have a soapbox. Everyone has their own individual soapbox now, and that's obnoxious, like beyond obnoxious.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, as it comes to information and what that looks like in the future, I think we're all just getting really exhausted by all these individual soapboxes of how people are like, well, I don't think this is right. And it's like, nobody asked for your opinion. Nobody gives a shit. Use social media for something other than just spewing out your opinion. Like, nobody really cares. Frankly, nobody really cares about your opinion.
Yeah.
I mean really,
yeah. I mean, I think that people, I mean, everybody has a right. They certainly have a right to an opinion.
They have a right to, but of course they have a right. But that's the problem. They take it to an ultimate extreme, where they think that everything that they believe is right and that everyone around them is wrong.
That's right.
And it's just so bubble world, and I can't be around it. I can't stand that when people say to me or to other people, like, well, you should do X, Y, and Z, or you shouldn't do this or shouldn't do that. And it's like, who the hell do you think you are telling another human being what they should or should not be thinking? And that goes both ways, right?
Yeah.
So it's not for me, or it's not my role, or it's not your role to tell someone that's on either side of the aisle
Any
what
topic,
they should not be thinking. I would never dream of that. And when all the political kind of vomit and diarrhea over the past 4 years was happening, you had people that were just um, getting into massive arguments with people about their opinions. And it's, you can disagree with someone, you can decide not to be around that person, but you cannot tell them that the way they view the world is wrong, because you are not that person, you know. And it's just not your place in the world to do that, or to have judgments like that on other people.
And by the way, this is a people do this universally. I mean, this is happening
Yeah.
everywhere. Everybody's telling people how and what to think, and I think that, I mean, my opinion on it is, yes, everybody has a right to an opinion, and that's essential to our democracy, and it's good to have an opinion. But I think the problem within it too is that like there's a I think there's like some part of the equation missing, because I believe people can have an opinion, but like I have my opinions about things, but I also know that I could be wrong. I know that with any opinion that I have, that I could be wrong about something. And like if I'm wrong, like I'm wrong, and I think that I think a lot of people aren't as okay with themselves being wrong about things.
Yeah, that's ego.
Like
I
ego.
would be interested to see, and I don't think there's been any studies as of yet, because if you think about the social media and its role in society is still fairly new. So, and even over the past 4 years of how much it's changed. And I'd be interested to see a study and I'm sure they're working on it at some point, of the comparing the ego and the increase of the ego taking over in relation and correspondence with the usage of social media.
Yeah, that's
Because
interesting.
it's really where it comes down to is the ego itself does not allow you to be wrong. You're never wrong, and you never take accountability, and it's always someone else's problem.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing that in just a lot of on an individual basis. And what's interesting to me is that those individuals that I know that allow their ego to take over use social media heavily.
Really?
So it's almost like they are have insecurities about themselves. They find validation on the internet of their views, whatever they may be, and it pumps up this ego to the point where they have the balls to be able to tell someone, well, what you think is wrong. And I think in the past, they wouldn't have had a platform to just spew whatever they wanted to spew.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's so what you're saying is that essentially there's a danger of people that are just crazy, or just like opinions that don't make sense, like becoming, like, let's say somebody is talking about penguins flying over central Hollywood. Like if you say that, and then more people start saying it, it becomes this mainstream that there's really penguins flying around outside on the street. And
Correct.
and because people will believe anything. And that's where the problem comes in.
So how do you, from I think it goes back to what we talked about last week in terms of having the wherewithal and the critical thinking to know in your own self that you don't follow just blindly what everyone else is saying or doing, that you actually think for yourself and think, does that make sense that penguins would be flying over Hollywood?
Right.
Oh, wait, it doesn't, because penguins don't fly,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you know? And it's bringing in your own critical thinking, I think, is what's really lacking. But I also am really concerned about this ballooning of the ego, that people just feel that they have the right to put anyone down or tell them that their experience was not their experience. Like, that's insane. That's insanity to me.
Well, right,
That's
like what happened with AOC.
correct. Like, that's crazy to me that people can respond and say, well, that's not what happened, you lied. And it's like, you can't say that. Are you her? You know, is she you? Have you ever walked in her shoes? You cannot say that stuff. You know, you can disagree with her, but you can't outwardly tell someone that their experience that
That's
they
right.
had at the
That's
Capitol
right.
riot was untrue.
That's right.
You know,
Yeah. That's right.
I don't know. I think people have just gotten, I think everybody needs to do an ayahuasca ceremony and like seriously strip down the ego, because it's
Yeah.
gotten to be very problematic in more ways than one.
Yeah. I love somebody said this week about that, like they don't trust somebody's political views until they've been through an ayahuasca ceremony. I don't know who that was, but I forget. It was really funny, that
It was
tweet.
Michael Cernovich.
Yeah, Cernovich said that. Yeah, it's hilarious. He's hilarious.
Yeah.
You know, he's that's really interesting. He said that, and it's right. And you know, just on information in general, you know, we need more. I heard, I think Scott Adams was talking about this. We see a topic or an issue come up or whatever on the news, and we just see, you know, kind of pundits come on and go back and forth and so on and so forth, and like it just kind of becomes this rile up people up and not know, and there's pundits and that's it. Like, I feel like our information needs to start having some things on the news and just in general in the world where people can see transparency and see things more so that they understand. Like, one of the biggest topics of debate is, you know, that people still go through with stuff is climate change, you know? And we have this ongoing debate about if it's real, if it's not real. Why don't we just rent an auditorium, get 15 experts, the best experts in the world on it, and have them, and get the 15 skeptics of it, and have them debate on a stage in an auditorium and air it to the world and say, here's what the biggest skeptics versus the biggest experts on climate change are saying, and debate. Instead of having like one pundit from some random place say it and one expert, and then we never hear of it again. We need to see more of that type of thing, I feel like, you know? Because people just, it helps bring clarity to things so people can see what people are saying. There's not enough of that happening. Like, and I feel like we could do that more on a lot of topics. Like, what do you think about that?
I mean, I think we have debates. I mean, we have debates online all the time. If you ever see a news article come out on anything, you'll see, and people will post, you know, immediately of what their opinion is, because everyone cares about what everyone's opinion is. Mm-hmm. And I post my reactions to their opinions, and I think people just get a little bit even strong into their own belief system. So even though they're getting the facts and they're seeing, you know, both sides, they're not able to look at things that objectively. The brain doesn't allow you to do that. The brain went the way naturally we like to believe. We like to read the things that we believe in.
Yeah, I guess so.
And you have to be someone of a higher consciousness, to allow yourself to sit there and listen to two different scientists and say, you know, that's interesting on the other side, you know? And a lot of people aren't able to handle that. You know, they really, and they don't care. They want to believe what they believe, and they believe what they believe is fact. So if you were to create some forum where you had all the scientists in the world on one side and all the other scientists on the other, and they debate, it would just cause more people to dig their heels into their own belief system.
Yeah. It would just reaffirm.
You just reaffirm what they were already thinking. But like, see, I told you.
What they already think. That's what social media kind of does is escalate that to begin with. The problem is it makes it's kind of doing a good thing and a bad thing at the same time, because I feel like it's doing that, but it's also escalating the opinions. Like, take climate change. If some moron who doesn't know what they're talking about on that topic, it escalates as well. So it's kind of doing both at the same time. Now, and before we get into healthcare, we'll talk about that for the last 5 or 10 minutes, but Twitter has come out with Birdwatch. This is the last thing on the topic. Have you heard about Birdwatch?
I have.
Twitter? Now, yes. I mean, I want to hear you say, but like, my first thought on it was, Birdwatch, what it is basically when somebody tweets something or says something that's happening in the world or in the news, that then other people can chime in and add context to it for clarity. Now, my first thought on that was that, something like that, the problem is it's just allowing the mass to say what's true and what's not, and that's just going to create chaos. However, I then thought about it more, and I was like, well, but if somehow they were like, say something comes up, like X topic on something, if it showed both sides of the opinion on the topic, that could be good, because it could be showing people the full clarity. So if you had somebody talking about, pillows, you could have somebody come in and talk about why pillows are good and why they're bad. So you see the full context of whatever that person said about pillows by what people on both sides are saying. Because when we see things in social media or in the news, we don't always see the full picture of what's happening, which is what I strive to do when I'm posting on Facebook and posting on Twitter. I try to show everyone kind of everything. So, because the news doesn't always do that, but purposely, and the news even says that now. But I think what Twitter's doing is kind of brilliant in that way, if they can make it work correctly, because something's tweeted, then they'll show you what kind of both sides are saying on that, and that's good. But the problem is, if it doesn't do that correctly, it's just asking for chaos, because you'll have a million people with a million different interpretations of how something is, and it's just going to make people more confused. So I think Twitter's going to have to really do a good job with it. But I think it's very kind of iffy, dicey territory. Like, I'm rooting for them to hopefully make it work, but I definitely have some skepticism about them. What do you think about it?
I applaud them for trying. I could see what Jack's trying to do, in that they're trying to make sense of a very chaotic forum. People have just kind of lost their heads a little bit. Cooler heads are not prevailing. People will just type out whatever it is, on top of their head, and they don't really think. I actually don't think people are thinking anymore. I think people are so quick. So trigger happy to get out the first comment or the first, shitty comment to whoever, that they're not truly actually thinking anymore. And it's so easy for everyone just to type it out and then hit send or return or whatever, enter, and then be done and move on with your life, and there's just not even there almost needs to be a waiting period. Almost like Gmail has. I was so happy that Gmail created this. And I was at Google when they did. I was like, God, why did it take Gmail so long to create this? They finally created the unsend button. Now, Microsoft Office or Microsoft Outlook had it for years. And I'm like, why doesn't Gmail have this? Because oftentimes, we'll send it and be like, oh, wait, unsend. And Gmail never allowed you to do that. Where I feel as though social media's responsibility is to create an atmosphere where you force the person to pause. That's why that a lot of times when you're having to respond to a boss or a coworker and you're having to email, or a loved one or whatever, and you're emailing them, they always say to create the draft, read it, sleep on it, and then reread it again tomorrow, because you're not just throwing up your emotions. At that point, you have a cooler head and can maybe adjust things, or maybe it's perfect, but at least have that pause before it actually goes live, so that, you know, it almost has to like be a pop-up saying like, okay, are you sure you want to post this? Because it almost checks the brain like, hey, you're about to post this really shitty comment. Are you sure you want to do that? Or whatever comment, you know? Though I do applaud Jack for what he's doing, and I think they're trying out everything. I think now that social media has changed our brain patterns to be so quick on the trigger when we comment, that I think there actually needs to be a little bit more of an automatic response in terms of forcing humans to take a breath before they hit send.
Yeah.
You know, if that's my idea. I haven't heard it expressed out there, and if anyone steals it, I'm copywriting it right now. So
Yeah, you mean just helping people step away for a second before acting on impulse is what you're referring to,
because we've lost that window of between thinking, you know, should I send this? Should I, you know, and it's all quick, you know, and Twitter's even faster than, I mean, when you know, you're the one who got me on Twitter or really using Twitter. And I'm like, now on Facebook, I'm like, oh my God, everyone's so behind. You know, Twitter's so immediately.
Kira's on Twitter now. Kira is officially on Twitter.
I know.
Yeah.
And you hear the news, like on Facebook, people are just talking about the news that happened like 8 hours ago. And I'm like, oh my God, you guys are so slow.
Yeah.
But that's the problem, is like Twitter's so quick that I think Jack really actually needs to focus on not the speed of how fast you can get a response, but actually slow that down.
Yeah.
Reverse and slow the brain down so that you can give a little bit more break in between the thought process and the response, because right now they're just sandwiched together into one, you know, and I think that's a massive problem. I think if people actually had the 2 or 3 seconds to think like, wait a second, do I want to send this? I think we would be surprised to see how many responses were not sent.
Yeah.
You know?
I think, I think that's a good idea and a good point that does need to be emphasized on that. It'll be interesting to see where they go, how that works, how Birdwatch works, and something like that I think would be really helpful. So good idea. You have good ideas. She's really smart, people. She's like really smart. She's really smart. Anyway, that said, let's, in the last 5 minutes, I know Kira had messaged me about healthcare and just what's happening. And Kira, what are your thoughts on that and where things should go with that?
You know, I think you never really think about things that are important in the world unless it affects you. It's kind of natural, right? And I've always been a very healthy individual and never really had anything to deal with in terms of healthcare or doctors or hospitals or insurance or anything like that. I've read about it. I can empathize. But until you truly live in it, you know, you don't realize how screwed up the healthcare system is in the US. And when I had gotten my procedures done yesterday, my colonoscopy and my endoscopy, I had gotten home and Geoff had, being such the good brother that he is, texted me to make sure I was feeling good and everything. And, you know, I was thinking, I'm like, you know, if all of the studies, all the Harvard medical studies are showing, and all the Cleveland Clinic studies are showing that colon cancer is almost now an epidemic from the ages of 20 to 34 in the US. They're saying by 2030, it will increase in that age group by 124%. And yet, no insurance on this earth will cover a colonoscopy for a 30-year-old. And it's because they have a screening barrier, right? It used to be 50, now it's 45. And it made me question, and thankfully mine was covered from what I know, because I have family that has had colon cancer. So, but it almost is like, you don't have to have family that has had cancer in order to get cancer. But you see all these studies that are coming out that more young individuals are getting all of these conditions, and yet insurance, they won't bring down the bar in terms of screening. And it gave me pause in the sense that in the US, it's the medical industry is a for-profit. So they're there to help you, obviously, and make you better, but they make more money if you're sick. Mm-hmm. And it was a bit of an uneasy feeling for me, knowing that there's probably 38-year-olds like myself who are probably walking around with cancer, don't know it, because a lot of cancer, there's no symptoms, and yet their doctor's telling them, no, we don't have to screen for you, not yet, because your insurance won't cover it and you don't really need to. Meanwhile, are they preventing, or are they saying not to get the test so that because they'll get more money when you have cancer? I mean, I hate to think that, but at the same time, hospitals make more money if you have cancer versus you just getting screened for cancer.
Yeah.
And I use cancer as an example, but I have a feeling that that's happening a lot, where I'll give you another example. I was talking to a friend of mine last night where, pap smears for women used to be annually. Mm-hmm. You would go to get your exam, and they moved that now to every 3 to 5 years, like out of the blue. Just now, pap smears are for cancer of the uterus, so they can, and I have a plethora of that in my family. So for them to say, oh, don't worry, we now moved it. It's almost like an oil change in the car. It's like, oh, you don't have to do 3,000 miles, do 10,000 now. And it's like, why? Oh, well, that's what the doctors are saying now. Now the insurance will only cover for every 3 years. And it's like, yeah. Oh my gosh, it seems, it's very disconcerting, and it makes you question not so much the health providers or the professionals, but question the country that you're in, and the big pharma and the lobbyists, and who are they actually, what side are they on exactly? Are they on the side of money, or are they on the side of actually saving people? Because if you think about it, if they were to create a vaccine or a drug that were to eradicate cancer tomorrow, mm-hmm. Not entirely sure they would do it.
You don't think so, huh?
They make more money with people being sick. And I hate saying that, but it's that is the United States healthcare system, that I think the more you're sick, the more they make money off of you. And I don't think doctors do it intentionally. I think it's just the way it's set up. It was a little disconcerting. And I remember texting you last night, like, this is really messed up, and I'm not even affected by it, but I see now what families are going through when it comes to having to take your healthcare in your own hands, because you can't really trust that they're there to help you. Exactly. They want to make money off of you.
Yep. Damien says there's no money in cures. She's right. Big Pharma is the cause. Hi, Damien. I agree. I think that this directly connects into the information thing, because a lot of media companies and social media and all of those stay in business through conflict, through people being mentally unhealthy and screaming at each other and debating, and that helps them make money. It's the same thing with the physical illness in the companies. Tragically, these big pharma and such, on the surface you would like to think people, they want people to be healthy, but it also, if everybody was healthy, it puts them out of business. Is your
Right.
point, I think.
You
And
know, if you think
so,
about how much money all the donations for all the pink breast cancer awareness, do you know how much money that brings in? Yes, it goes to funding for cancer research, but my God, we can come out with a vaccine for COVID in less than a year,
yeah,
and yet cancer's been around forever, and we can't seem to figure out how to eradicate chemo at least. I just it makes you question things a little bit,
yeah,
and it makes me even more interested in alternative methods should I ever get sick. And I don't mean cancer, but I just mean that there's a reason why people go to other countries to get things done. You
yeah.
know, one, it's cheaper, and two, that they're not necessarily there to make money off of you, like here in the US. It didn't sit well with me, and it still is not sitting well. And I'm not entirely sure what the answer is. And I think you and I had discussed it last night via text, where you were like, well, what's the solution? And I think it's getting Big Pharma out of the government, you know, lobbyists that shouldn't be in the government. Healthcare and government should not be one, you know, it just doesn't seem it's not right. And I realize that people are probably watching this like, no shit, Care, where have you been? But you don't really realize it until you see it yourself and are in it yourself. And you're like, wow, I have to really pay attention to my own health. Like, doctors are going to just screen me for things when the insurance will pay for it, you know, and it might be too late at that point. You know?
Do you think other countries don't have the same issue, the same problem though? I mean, do you think it's happening in other countries?
I mean, not to bring up a separate issue, but I don't think socialism and you know, the way healthcare exists in like the UK or New Zealand or Australia, for example, I don't think they have the same problem.
Yeah, in like New Zealand and why is that? Because because the way their healthcare system works isn't so geared towards money, towards like
it's not privately funded at that point. It's government, you know, government created, which opens up a whole can of worms. I realize that because it's like socialist healthcare, which a lot of people freak the fuck over. But to be fair, I mean, I'm not entirely sure private companies are doing us any favors, you know?
Why can't we have some look? I'm not a person with like a that reacts to these type of thing like a lot of people do. Like, why can't we like systems? We already have some aspects of socialism in our system. Like, we already do. Like, there's some elements of it, like pieces of it, like what they do with healthcare, that are like good, you know, like that help, that we need, you know, and people react so much to that type of thing. You know, they think, oh, that's going to lead us into being a communist nation and such and everything. And like trying to like open the mind a little bit about some things, you know, just like a little bit.
No.
People won't do that. They don't do that. But I think your point is well made. You know, I think we do need to look at our whole approach. And this is not just me, you know, lecturing like, say, Republicans. It's a problem with Democrats. It's a problem with our whole system. There's just certain things we need to look at, and the healthcare is something that both sides that we need to look at and improve, because you're right. We don't need to be prioritizing money over people being healthy. We just don't. We need people to not be sick. So with that, I think we need to wrap up. I see there's one comment from Damien. Do you see it, or should I read it? Or I can.
You can read it if you'd like. Yeah.
He says insurance lobbyists make sure that insurance companies were brought in to be a part of the legislature. What industry is ever allowed to help write their laws on how they are to be governed? How wrong is that?
Right. And that's where the other countries don't have insurance, because it's already paid for by the government. So you don't have the middleman. And he's right in terms of insurance companies allowing to come in to write the laws of the very thing that supports them. Yeah. And not the person that's sick. It supports the insurance company before the sick person. And that to me is bonkers. I think this country is very hung up on money, way more than any other country. We are so consumed with making money, with having enough money, with, I mean, it's grossly over the top with how obsessed this country is with money. And we see that in every area of our
Yeah.
society.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully things will improve. Well, with that being said, I think that hopefully, things will. All we could do is keep pushing forward. So, episode 54. This was great today. I know we both got a hop, but we're expanding what networks we're on. We're on back on Geoff and Kira Live Facebook. We'll be on more networks going forward. We're on Kira's YouTube page now. My YouTube page, my Twitter. We're gonna keep building on that. So it's coming along. Here at Geoff and Kira Live, we're the future. The future is Geoff and Kira Live. Anything else you have, or are you good?
I'm good. I'm healthy. I'm good. It's freezing here. It's 20 degrees.
Everything went great yesterday. You're feeling
yes,
well?
everything went great. They took 2 polyps out. Thank God I went. I mean, I think the last comments I would say on today's show would be take care of you because you matter the most, and the doctors may or may not, and the insurance companies may or may not see it that way. So make sure that you're putting yourself first. So.
And I had, just last thing. I had, we had colon cancer in my family. My grandfather had Crohn's. Just on what people say, I know how big of an issue, just healthcare is in general, but just also, what you had yesterday, and just, get colon screenings. You should do that. Back a few years ago with Michelle Money, she was on The Bachelor. We would do different events for raising money for colon cancer. It's an important cause to me. Obviously, it is to Kira as well. So definitely get that screening, and hopefully we can push towards a world where everyone can get better health care. So thanks everyone for tuning in. See them next week, right?
Bye everyone.
Bye
Jeff.
everyone. Later, Kira.